Hello my friends and welcome to the channel. Today we are on the Battle for Azeroth beta and we are taking a look at the Destruction Warlock. This is a spec that is going to play similarly to how it has since Mists of Pandaria, but there are a few changes worth noting, and there are, as you can see from this other Warlock, some really cool animation updates that we can take a look at. So without further ado, let's take a look at the spellbook. Now, there aren't a whole lot of passive abilities that we need to talk about with the Demon Hunter, but some of them are listed here anyway. So Soul Shards is just your resource that you're going to build up and then spend on Chaos Bolts or on Rain of Fire for AoE scenarios. Soul Leech is your passive absorb shield that you gain from dealing damage. You don't really have to worry about this. It's just going to be there. It's just going to kind of happen. Your Mastery is Chaotic Energies, which causes your spells to deal increased damage and then an additional random amount up to double what they're dealing baseline, and it causes you to take reduced damage with the same kind of randomness, but not completely random mechanic. Backdraft is the one that we have to pay attention to because this does impact your rotation. So Conflagrate, which is your instant cast rotational ability, will reduce the cast time of your next Incinerate or Chaos Bolt by 30%. So you want to pay attention to when you're using this and how you're using it. So what is the basic rotation for Destruction? Well, you're going to build up Soul Shards using most of your abilities, and then you're going to spend them with Chaos Bolt. The meat of the rotation is going to be keeping up Immolate 100% of the time on your target, or as many targets as you need to keep it up on, and using Conflagrate to avoid capping on charges, and then using that buff probably ideally on Chaos Bolts. Mana isn't really an issue for Warlocks anymore. They've really downplayed that mechanic. You don't have life tap anymore. You don't really have to worry about mana, so you'll probably want to use that on Chaos Bolts most of the time if you can do it. But you could use it on Incinerates if you just really need to get Incinerate out as quickly as possible. And then Incinerate is your filler that you use to generate shards. Chaos Bolt, of course, being your single target spender, and then Rain of Fire being your AoE spender. So let's look at the active abilities that we have in addition to those rotational abilities. We've got Banish, which is your CC that is usable on demons, aberrations, or elementals. Chaos Bolt is your spender. It does heavy damage. Its damage is still increased by your crit chance, and it is a guaranteed critical strike every time you cast it. Conflagrate is your instant rotational ability. It has 2 charges, so if you want to hold on to one of those charges to buff a Chaos Bolt, even when you're out of Soul Shards, you are able to do that without wasting damage. We've got Health Stones and the Soul Well, which I'll actually drop one because the animation has been updated and it looks pretty cool now. So there it is. And my inventory is full, so I can't grab a Health Stone, but there it is. Health Stones are still 25% health. These are all talents, so we'll talk about those in the talent tree. Demonic Gateway is still here. This is your big raid utility movement. You cast it and then you can zip away. So that's there. Drain Life is your heal over time ability that you can use. It does less damage than your other filler abilities. It generates no soul shards, but it does heal you for a pretty significant amount if you need it. And then Enslaved Demon is kind of flavor utility. You can use it on a demon up to your level +1, and it will essentially become another minion for you for that duration for up to 5 minutes. Eye of Kilrog is a flavor ability that has some utility in things like Battlegrounds. If you want to go check out particular nodes, you can summon it and then just run around, jump around, all that good stuff. We've got Fear, which is your classic Warlock crowd control ability. Havoc has been slightly changed from live. On live, it's a 45-second cooldown. On beta, it is a 25-second cooldown, so you can use it more frequently, but it does less damage. So instead of causing your spells to strike the Havoc target for 100% of the damage, it will cause your spells to strike the Havoc victim for 75% of normal damage. But this is made up for by the higher uptime that you can keep on it. We've got Health Funnel, which allows you to send some of your health to your demon. So if you're in This is mostly going to be useful in open world content where you can heal your Voidwalker while he's out there tanking for you, but it's also got some use if your pet is about to die in a raid and you need to heal it up real quick, because healers don't always pay attention to pets. Immolate is your dot that you need to keep up all of the time. This does generate some soul shard fragments. Every time it deals damage, it generates one, and it has a 50% chance to generate an additional fragment on crit. So that's just some passive resource generation with your dot that you want to keep up regardless of that generation, because it does strong damage. Incinerate is just your filler ability that generates fragments. Rain of Fire is your AoE spender. Ritual of Summoning has received an animation update. Now, I don't have a group with me, so we can't show this off, but you can look it up either on Wowhead or if you get some friends and go on PTR. Basically, it looks less like a closet and more like a flasher now. So there's that. Shadowburn is a talent. Shadow Fury is no longer a talent. It is now baseline for Warlocks. You have a 1.3 second cast AoE stun. Very strong utility for Warlocks, which is something where they already excel a bit. This is Singe Magic, is the command demon ability for the imp. We can talk about that when we look at the demons themselves. Soulfire is a talent, so we'll talk about that later. Soulstone is your battle res that you can preemptively cast on the target that you want it to be on. We've got Summon Demon, so you have the Imp, the Voidwalker, the Fell Hunter, and the Succubus, and they each have their own unique abilities. In fact, let me go ahead and dismiss the Imp so that we can take a look at their abilities. So if you have no pet active, you have Command Demon in your spellbook, in addition to the other spell that we've looked at. So with the Imp, you get Singe Magic, which is a Dispel. With the Succubus, you get Seduction, which is another crowd control ability. With the Voidwalker, you get Shadow Bulwark, which is a defensive. And with the Fell Hunter, you get Spell Lock, which is an interrupt. So it's important to keep track of which one of those abilities you might need for a particular fight. And if you don't need any of them, then you can just use whichever pet is going to end up doing the highest damage. Probably going to be the Imp, particularly in target switching scenarios, but we'll need to keep an eye on how the sims look for that. So those are the demons you have and the utility that they bring. Summon Infernal is, you'll notice, no longer permanent. We'll talk about that in the talent tree, but it is now a baseline offensive cooldown for Destruction Warlocks. It does strong single target and AoE damage, and it generates a soul shard fragment every half second that it is active. So that it will give you 60 fragments over the 30 seconds that it is active, which is 6 full soul shards. Pretty nice to have that baseline and to see it being a strong single target and AoE offensive cooldown. Unending Breath is mostly flavor, but it does increase your swim speed. So in some scenarios where you're going underwater in a dungeon, which does happen in one of the Legion dungeons, this will be nice to have thrown in your group and you can get to your target a little bit faster. Unending Resolve is your defensive ability. So that kind of wraps up the spellbook. Let's take a look at the talents, because there's a lot going on here. So in tier 15, we have Flashover, which causes Conflagrate to deal 25% more damage and grant 2 charges of Backdraft. Backdraft is that passive buff that we talked about that makes your next Chaos Bolt or Incinerate cast faster. So you can get 2 charges of it every time you Conflagrate with Flashover, in addition to the damage buff. Eradication gives you that damage window with Chaos Bolt. So if you can sneak in a couple of Chaos Bolts in a row, or even try to get 3 of them in that 7-second window, you can get a nice little damage buff going there. You got Soulfire, which is a now accessible to Destruction Warlocks. This does decent damage and generates soul shard fragments, and its cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds for every soul shard you spend. So if you're getting 2 or 3 Chaos Bolts off during that 20-second cooldown, you're actually going to be bringing it down to a 12 or even an 8-second cooldown. So that's nice to have. Tier 30, we've got Reverse Entropy, which gives you a chance to proc 15% haste for 8 seconds when you cast a spell. We've got Internal Combustion, which causes Chaos Bolt to consume up to 5 seconds of your Immolate and instantly deal that damage. if you're going to run with this, you'll need to just be doubly aware of the duration of your Immolate ability, because you don't want to cast a Chaos Bolt with less than 5 seconds left on that. You'll be losing damage, and you want to make sure that you're keeping that buff up all the time. And then we've got Shadowburn, which is still a spender nowadays, as it has been in Legion, and it's instant cast. This is a really helpful movement ability if you're in a very movement heavy fight, and you need to be able to cast and do damage while you're moving. Well, you have 2 charges of Shadowburn, you have 2 charges of Conflagrate, so that gives you 4 instant cast abilities that you can pull up and then use during movement. Really nice to have. Tier 45, we've got defensives and utilities. Demon Skin causes your Soul Leech, which is your passive absorb shield, to now just passively generate absorb damage, and it also increases the maximum amount that it can have to 15% of your health instead of 10%. Burning Rush is your sprint that also sacrifices your health. So you enable it, and then your health starts to go down pretty rapidly. This guy's got a whole army with him. But it allows you to get to your duration faster. So if you're in a group content and you got like a Resto Druid or some other kind of healer with you who can put a haunt on you, you'll be able to keep this up a lot longer. But it can be really nice to have if you need to get from point A to point B really quick. Dark Pact sacrifices 20% of your current health. Now, this is your current health even if you have a demon active. You'll notice that it still says of your current health. So this is a little bit more tricky to use compared to on live, where it sacrifices your demon's health instead of your own. And now it always sacrifices your own, but it does give you a 250% absorb shield compared to what the health that you took. And you can use it while you're suffering from control impairing effects. So if you get stunned and you're about to die, well, if you're not about to die, but let's say you get stunned at 70% health, you can use this and give yourself a nice survivability boost while you are stunned, for example. Tier 60 is your AoE tier, so you've got Inferno, which gives Rain of Fire a chance to generate Soul Shard fragments, which in AoE is going to allow you to cast more Rain of Fires because it costs 3 shards, which is quite a lot. Fire and Brimstone gives your Incinerate a passive cleave, so let's just take a look at that on these imp friends over here. So you cast it, and then it hits every target that's within 8 yards of your main target. So that's a pretty nice little passive cleave. And then Cataclysm is your burst AoE ability. It does very strong damage and applies Immolate to all targets that it hits. Very strong, hopefully going to be very useful in Mythic Plus or in burst AoE fights in raids. Tier 75, Dark Fury reduces the cooldown of Shadow Fury by 15 seconds. So you have your stun baseline, and you can bring it down to a 45-second cooldown if you need it more frequently. Mortal Coil is your instant cast Horrify, Fear, CC ability that also heals you. So those are 2 things that you need to consider about it when choosing a talent on this tier. If you need the heal, then Mortal Coil is really, really nice to have there. And then Demonic Circle is your classic Warlock teleport ability. So you drop your circle, and then you go stand where you want to stand, and then when the fire gets dropped under you, you teleport back to your circle. If you have predictable movement where you know there's going to be a safe space on a fight, or you have to go from one point to another and then back again really quickly, this is going to be really helpful. If you don't need the movement in a raid and you don't need a stun, which is you rarely do need a stun in raids, then Mortal Coil is probably going to be your go-to for the heal. Tier 90, we've got Roaring Blaze, which causes Conflagrate to deal additional damage over 6 seconds. Pretty boring ability, but it does have some decent synergy with Flashover, where you get additional damage and then you're buffing that damage. So yeah, there's that. Grimore of Supremacy. This is actually really cool the way it works in BFA now. So instead of giving you a permanent Infernal or Doomguard, which you may have noticed is not even in your spellbook anymore, you now gain damage for your Chaos Bolt for every Soul Shard that you spend while your Infernal is active. So he's up for 30 seconds. He generates 6 full Soul Shards over that duration, and you're going to be generating Soul Shards, using your basic abilities anyway. So you can drop your Infernal and then cast a bunch of Chaos Bolts, and your Chaos Bolt is going to hit harder and harder and harder as long as your Infernal is up. that's a really cool flavor that adds to your baseline cooldown. I'm going to remove this because the sound is kind of annoying me a little bit. And then Grimore Sacrifice, which gives you the utility ability from the pet that you have. So again, that would be the Dispel from the Imp, the offensive Dispel, the defensive from the Voidwalker, the Interrupt from the Fell Hunter, and the CC from your Succubus. And it causes you to deal additional damage. So this tier is all about, you know, what do you need to do in a fight? Do you need to interrupt, but it's a multi-target fight, so the Fell Hunter is not a great option? Then you can take Grimoire of Sacrifice, and you'll have the interrupt, and you'll be able to switch targets without having to worry about your pet wandering all over Azeroth. If you need more burst damage during your cooldowns, then Grimoire of Supremacy is probably going to be the go-to. If you just need more passive damage, like it's just a, you know, regular damage fight, then Roaring Blaze might be tuned to be the best option, even as boring as it is. Grimore of Supremacy is pretty cool, so that's hopefully going to be the go-to in situations where you don't need to pull the utility off of your pet for Grimoire of Sacrifice. And then tier 100, we've got Soul Conduit, which gives you a 15% chance to refund every soul shard that you spend. Channel Demon Fire, which looks amazing. We can show this off for just a minute here. It does, you have to have your Immolate on a target, but then once you do, you can use it, and that is just such a cool looking ability. And it does really strong damage. It actually, so if you multiply out the 15 bolts times the damage that they do, the damage matches Chaos Bolt. Now, on paper it matches Chaos Bolt, but you have to remember that Chaos Bolt is a guaranteed crit and has its damage increased by your crit chance. So it's going to be less damage, but it is just free damage. It doesn't cost anything, no mana, no soul. Well, it does cost mana, but mana is pretty much irrelevant for Warlocks now. And it doesn't cost soul shards. It also doesn't generate soul shards, but if you want to target your damage to one target with your Immolate, this can be a really strong ability to have. Probably not going to be as strong as Dark Soul and Stability though. So this will be your basic, talented offensive cooldown. And the thing with this is you can stack Dark Soul with your Infernal, not every time, but every other time your Infernal is up, you'll have Dark Soul to match with it, and then you'll be getting 30% increased crit chance, which is going to increase your Chaos Bolt damage while your Infernal is active. You're also buffing your Chaos Bolt every time you cast it with every soul shard you spend while your Infernal is active. And then if you take abilities like Soulfire and Shadowburn, which give you more soul shard fragments, you can get even more Chaos Bolts to play into that. So there's some really strong synergy with Warlock cooldown talents going on there. So that wraps up the spellbook and the talent tree. Let's just cast for a little bit, because the last thing that I wanted to show is that Warlock has received some really cool animation updates that are worth showing off. So here's the new Chaos Bolt. Looks much more like a Chaos Bolt than what it looked like previously. You can see the dot from Immolate looks really nice, burning on the target, and the updated Incinerate is just really cool. Now, of course, I have the green fire in my Warlock. I don't want to go turn that off just for the sake of the video, but the red fire looks pretty cool as well if that's how you roll, or if you never got the green fire. So, yeah, that's the Destruction Warlock in all his chaos bolty glory. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel if you like what you see. We're putting out a lot of World of Warcraft content heading into Battle for Azeroth, and hopefully as we continue in Battle for Azeroth, we'll be able to put out more and more content for the community and for the fun. I hope you liked this video, and I will see you in that next video. Thanks, and bye-bye.